talking, or maybe that's just what you want me to do is talk. That's whatever you want, we can do it. So, for us, the four vertical concept is, we really believe that if we commit to it, it forces defenses to change their structure and do some things that they don't want to do. And if we're not getting the looks that allow us to complete some of the stuff in the four verticals, it opens up our menu of everything else that we want to do underneath. And so the title is Go Big or Go Home. We really believe that. We believe that it's kind of a gunslinger mentality. We want to sell that to our kids. We want to sell that inside our program. We want to sell it to the point where the defensive opposition in our league knows that they're going to have to defend us in depth or we're going to tear the top off their coverage. And it's definitely a focus and a goal set for us. Are you guys cool if I move kind of faster through some of the other stuff and kind of get to film and we can kind of talk about what's really important? And all right. Not that trust in teams not important, so don't get me wrong. So for us, we are a hurry up, no huddle. And I think that I have this on here because I don't think we can really talk about the four verticals without the other two pieces of the puzzle. So we're a hurry up, no huddle offense. We want to go as fast and furiously as we can. We think that in the no huddle concept, in and of itself, it create some real challenges for the defense, whether it's getting their play calls in, whether it's forcing them to be vanilla in their looks, whether it forces them to make mistakes, physically tiring them out. There's a whole bunch of things that the hurry up, no huddle, we feel is a benefit for us. Our goal set is to be somewhere between 70 and 75 snaps a game. We've found over time that there's a whole lot of different things that can adjust that. Sometimes this year we played 13 games, and it was probably the most successful season that we've had at Puyallup in a long, long time, since the Mike Heward days. And I think at the end of the day, we only had, about 59 snaps a game. And that was just because a lot of times the contest it was out of hand. We had scored a lot of points already. Our kids were not on the field. So there's lots of different things that could adjust your snap count. I think you got to look at that in a little bit bigger perspective. But as a goal set goes, we're going to try to be 70 to 75 snaps a game. And then the next piece is our zone read, RPO. Our zone read is a triple option play. We feel like that makes defenses play responsibility football and be fundamentally sound. And if they're not, we're going to gash them in that triple option game. And then for us, the last couple of years, I think the RPO addition to that has really been a game changer. And then we cap that all off with stretching the field vertically and horizontally through our four vertical concept. So at Puyallup, generally defined, we're a box count team, so we want to be able to identify the numbers in the box. The box for us is defined as from offensive tackle to offensive tackle at a depth of 5 yards. Loosely speaking, if we have a 5-man box, we consider that clean and we want to run the ball. If we have a 6-man box, we feel it's even, so we have choice between run and pass. I think the last couple of years, and I say all this with the defensive guys in mind, knowing that the whole defensive strategy is trying to murk our box and not give us a clean look on whether it's 5, 6, or 7. And so being able to play in that middle zone of the 6-man box, the RPO has really given us a distinct advantage, I think, of being right when your quarterback can make decisions post-snap. And then obviously in a 7-man box situation, it's dirty. We want to be throwing the ball. And if you got a 7-man box and 6-man protection, you got to get the ball out fast. And that's another thing that we really push, is getting the ball out of our quarterback's hands real quickly. So, our two main offensive strategies is the zone read and the four verticals. This is our scoring over the last 9 years. The gray kind of indicates when we had to hunker down and go with some wildcat stuff because our quarterback situation wasn't what we would hope it would be. But in general, our goal is to score in 30-plus points a game. We feel like if we play good defense and good special teams, that should be enough to put us in position to win. And we feel like the four vertical concept gives us lots of threats to score points. Our vertical game, so that includes the 4 verticals, the corner concept, and the post concepts. They're all what we call catch plus 3 from the shotgun. We are probably 99 to 100% shotgun. We are going to teach our quarterbacks and receivers coverage families, and we're going to do that based upon the ideas of middle of the field open, middle of the field closed. We're going to teach zone and man demeanors based upon depth, eyes, and leverage of the corners and safeties. And then pretty loosely defined, we follow the outline of the R4 passing system, in that in all of our vertical stuff, we're going to have a rhythm route, we're going to have a read route, we're going to have a built-in rush route, and then we're going to have our quarterback have a planned release after that. So as we get into this a little bit more, we'll talk about in the 4 verticals, which is the rhythm route, which is the read route, and how that works with our quarterback's feet. The other thing that I think is important is for us, the 4 vertical concept is a middle field read. We're gonna have a seam holder and a seam reader, which is the 2 inside receivers that are working the middle of the field. And our quarterback's progression is 1 to 2, and then he's looking to get out of the pocket and do something different. So we're not going to ask him to hold the ball for a whole lot of time. If we want to get the ball to one of the outside routes, we'll talk about that a little bit later, we're going to call that from the sideline. It's a shot play. We're going to take advantage of leverage or matchups. We feel like we have a shot out there. We're going to push the ball out there. Ball security, you can do all the fun stuff on offense, but if you keep giving the ball back to the defense, it's not a very good thing. This year, we had 770 snaps. We only lost the ball 8 times, and we'd like it to be 0, but we were pretty happy with our turnover margin. Again, we want to play fast, and then we want to play faster. We want all the things that we're doing to be in a situation where we're controlling and dictating to the defense what we're going to do. We want our playmakers to be in space. We want to get them the ball in space and then let them be the talented athletes that they are. And then I think most importantly, we want to protect our passer, and we do that through the quick game, the screen game, and then quick releases, 1, 2 receiver progressions, and getting the ball out. I'm just going to move through some of this. I do think this one's relevant for at least me. I actually got it from Noel Mazzone at one of these clinics. It's the 12% rule. I call it the focus rule. It just reemphasizes to your kids about the things that we can control. We can control the turnover decisions that we make, sacks, drop balls, foolish penalties, and by eliminating those from our play count, we increase our chance to win the football game. And those statistics on there are Noel's, not mine, but I believe them to be relatively accurate. So if we're going to get 70 snaps a game, we get 8.4 my bads, which I hate that term, but that seems to be what we get from the kids. My bad, coach. Well, you only get 8.4 of those in a game. So why the 4 verticals? I touched on it earlier, but I think the number one reason, which isn't up there, is that it opens up everything else in our offense. So we believe in it as a play. We're going to throw it against every coverage. We're going to push the ball vertically. And in doing that, when you have to defend in depth for that, you're going to open up all the other facets of our offense. We believe it creates big plays. We want to be a big play offense, and we think that that's a key component to it. Threatens the defense both vertically and horizontally. It's difficult to defend with 1 high safety. And once you move to a 2 high safety look, it changes the configuration of your box, which again opens up all kinds of different opportunities for us underneath. We believe, our kids believe, that we can run that against any coverage. So we'll run it against 4, we'll run it against 2-man, we'll run it. Not to say that there's not better play calls in those situations, but we're going to approach it with the mentality that we're running it against anything that you throw at us. We think it creates great matchups and leverage. We think it's fun for our players. We get a lot of kids out that might not get out if we simply ran ISO all the time. And a lot of those kids that you get out, whether they be basketball kids or baseball kids, are pretty fun athletes to get on the football field. And then I think most importantly, it's fairly easy to teach. I think it's easy to teach. The concept is super simple. Sometimes the execution of it is a little bit more challenging, but from an understanding perspective, it's pretty straightforward. I think most importantly, you got to commit to it. If you're going to have it in your offense, if you're going to rep it, you got to be willing to throw it. Basic principle is super simple. There's 4 landmarks. Those landmarks don't change ever, regardless of our offensive formation, personnel grouping, the defensive structure, the coverage. There's 4 landmarks, and they remain consistent all the time. The second piece of that is we got 4 eligible receivers that are going to run down the field, and they're going to arrive at one of those landmarks ready to do their business. For us, in a 2x2 formation, these outside landmarks are down the bottom of the numbers, no closer than 4 yards to the sideline. If you came to our practice, you would hear that over and over and over and over and over, and asking kids to repeat to us, what is your landmark? Our landmark is down the bottom of the numbers, no closer than 4 yards to the sideline. The 2 inside landmarks are 2 yards outside the hash, and all 4 windows are at a depth of 18 to 22 yards. Not to say the ball's not delivered before that or after that sometimes, but that's the goal window. Here's kind of an example. This is an example of us in a 2x2 set with a 1 high safety. I think we'll find that we have a little bit of a snap issue here and a catch issue at the end, but you'll see that both the seam hold and the seam read route are open. Our quarterback does a nice job. So in our progression, the first route is the seam read. In this look, the seam read is our left slot receiver or our F receiver. When the quarterback seats the ball, he's going to take a 3-step drop, and when his back foot hits without a hitch, and through that whole drop back, his eyes are on the seam hold receiver. So his eyes should never change, and in doing that, we're either going to move this guy off his landmark, or if he stays there, I'm throwing the ball there right now. If he does move over there, I'm going to take 1 hitch step, I'm going to come back, I'm going to work the other hash. Oops. And oops. But you can see that we have a couple of good choices there. I mean, he probably could have thrown it in the first window, but the second window is definitely open as well. 3x1, once again, the windows don't change. Outside landmarks, down the bottom of the numbers, no closer than 4 yards to the sideline. Inside landmarks, even on the bender route, 2 yards outside the hash. Windows 18 to 22. To the greatest extent possible, we want to come under this guy and climb over him. We want to be as high as possible on our angle to enter that zone. And this is kind of a good picture to just talk about here for a sec. Maybe I got a little confused in explaining it in the earlier session. So when we get a little bit farther, so by default, when we begin teaching this concept, we have multiple ways that we can change this up, but by default, when we start, our Y receiver in trips is always our seam holder. So the number 3 receiver is going to be the seam holder. He's going to bend across the field and work to that hash mark, which F, our number 2 receiver, ends up being the seam read. So we got a seam hold and a seam read. Against a 1 high safety, both of those routes end up being seam hold routes. So the read for the read receiver is to hold his landmark. Does that make sense? Now, if he had a safety here in this box, capping this landmark, and a safety here in this box, capping this landmark, and we'll talk about it a little bit more as we go, but that's where the read really gets a little bit more detailed, whether it's a cover 4 safety here, or a cover 2 safety here, or no safety here, or a safety that wants to rotate down. There's a couple of different options that we'll talk about, but I think this picture helps. So we always have a seam hold, we always have a seam read. Sometimes the read route for the seam read is to simply maintain his landmark, and that's typically what happens against a 1 high or a no high safety. ahead and run that back. So again, here's our seam holder. He does a good job of getting under this guy and climbing vertically over the top of this guy to his landmark. Quarterback's back foot hits, his eyes are on the seam hold, sees that he's got space there. There should be no question delivering the ball, which he does. Now as the game goes on and this guy really starts jumping that route, then we're going to look at this seam read. Now, up here on the seam read, he's doing exactly what I ask him to do, which sometimes is not what we need him to do. In this particular look, I think that he probably should have maintained inside leverage on this guy, and although he wouldn't have been 2 yards outside the hash, I think he could have continued straight down the hash. So as this guy really starts to get involved in our seam hold, defending our seam hold route, this is really going to be a ball that we can throw to green grass. We talk about if this guy's even, he's leaving. So if we can get on the toes of this guy and push it vertical, then that would be the next place for our quarterback to throw off a hitch step, get some air under it, and push that ball vertically. He ends up trying to take him back outside to get exactly on his landmark and ends up getting a little bit tangled up, and I'm not sure that eventually he would have got there and won, but it's not the fastest path to get there. So goes back to I need you to do exactly what I want you and what I need you to do every time until I need you to do something else. And then the axiom of coaching, at least for me. Again, it's a middle read. We're always going to read from our seam hold to our seam read, and we're going to do it in that progression. So our quarterback's eyes are on the seam hold. On one hitch step, he moves to the seam read. That progression does not change. So through repetition and practice, our quarterback's feet should mirror those routes. So the routes that exist for us in the four verticals is we have 2 mandatory outside release go routes, a seam hold route, and a seam read route, and then a running back check down route. On the more route, we have give him some freedom with his alignment. We really want him to be able to position himself where he has the best chance of establishing that outside release. But typically it's anywhere from the top of the numbers to the bottom of the numbers. Sometimes our triple width, so out of a 3x1, our widest receiver will allow him to come in 2 yards from the top of the numbers. His job is to own the grass from the bottom of the numbers to the sideline. So our tube and our landmark is bottom of the numbers to no closer than 4 yards to the sideline. We want to run in that tube. And then for our outside release go route, it's our quarterback's job to throw him open with that fade ball. So he's going to use the space from the 4-yard space from the edge of his landmark box to the sideline with a fade ball over his outside shoulder to fade away from that defender and catch that ball. We need him, as his job is to own that grass. He needs to fight for an outside release, and he needs to get vertical as fast as he can, restack that defender, get on his hip, and maintain his tube. We talk about a 3-yard tube that is in vertical correlation with those landmarks that we're trying to get to, and we can't get redirected and funneled 5 yards outside of our tube. We've got to restack in our tube and be in a position to be where it is we need to be when we're supposed to be there. The idea of be covered early and get open late, there's going to be guys in our outside receivers' faces a lot. They want to get up, they want to hit them, redirect them, funnel them inside, funnel them outside. So for our quarterback's perspective, those guys are going to be covered early. There's going to have guys draped all over him until we get on his hip and push that thing vertically, and then it's our quarterback's job to throw him open. He's going to come open late based upon the throw of our quarterback. Most often it's a 3-ball. We use a 1, 2, and 3 ball to describe the balls that we want our quarterbacks to throw. Our fade ball is a 3-ball. Again, it's over the outside shoulder. We want to drop that ball in and allow him to fade to the sideline. Here's an example of mandatory outside release go. And again, this is not part of the progression. This is a shot that's called from the sideline. So we have a system by which we can communicate at the line of scrimmage. We're going to run dancer, but we're going to we're going to look to receiver X, receiver Y, receiver Z, and the quarterback does not have any other options. Now, we will ask him to work his eye progression to control this guy, but he has no other options on where he's going with the ball. He's going to win on that ball, or he's going to throw it to the skinny guy out of bounds, or he's going to pull it down and run. But that we've eliminated all the other options. Seam hold route, again, the important part of the seam hold is that they hold the spacing. At the end of the day, in the 4 verticals, for us, it's 4 routes going down the field, owning specific landmarks. 3 of those 4 have to own the space on their landmark. The third guy, or the fourth guy, the seam read guy, will be the guy that reads the leverage of the safety cap over him, and it becomes a one-on-one. But if we come off of our spacing of any of those other 3 routes, it allows other defenders to get in the mix, and now it's not a one-on-one that we can win with that cap safety. It's bringing too many people to the party. So those mandatory outside release goes, and the seam hold route, the most important thing is that they're holding their spacing. The next thing on those inside seam routes is they are our hot routes. So in our 6-man protection, we can count for people in the box. We don't account for the 2 number 2 defenders who are generally involved with our slot receivers on a redirection or a coverage. If they come off of that and they're bringing pressure, then those slot receivers have to be our hot routes. So at anywhere in the quarterback's drop, from a depth from 0 to 7 yards, we're asking those receivers, if your guy leaves, you replace him and expect that ball hot on you right now. The important things on that route is he's got to take the best release possible. He's got to see the edge blitzer. He wants to avoid collisions. We talk to our kids, if you get collided and taken out of your tube, you're really out of the progression. The progression happens too quickly. If you're knocked all the way out of your tube, you're not going to be able to restack and be where you're supposed to be when you need to be there. Most often that seam ball is a 2 ball, enough air to get over the linebackers, but still put on the receiver, preferably to his upfield shoulder. There is situations where we're able to get on the toes of the safety or whoever's capping our landmark. And once we get on we talk about if he's even, he's leaving. So if we're able to get on the toes, we'll continue to hold our landmark, and we'll allow our quarterback to throw a 3 ball and let our guy go get it. This is an example. So in this look, the number 3 receiver is the seam hold receiver. The F receiver is the seam read. So this is against a 1-high look. So for our quarterback, until his back foot hits, all he really needs to be doing is reading this safety. If this safety is getting involved with the number 3 receiver that's working to the seam hold landmark, then he's going to hitch up and he's going to throw it to the seam read. Now, in this situation with a 1-high look, there's nobody for this guy to read, so he just needs to stay on his landmark. Go ahead. Let's take a look at it. Yeah, so I think in this case I am. It's not ideal for sure. My concern is with this guy being in the box the way he is right now, if he tries to come under that, he's quite possibly going to get redirected right back down in there, and he's never going to be a threat getting to his landmark. At least if he stays high here, he's going to be able to come over the top of that like he does and work to get into that space. So it's not ideal, but I think it works in that situation.
Is he the hold guy in the trips?
In that look, he's the seam hold, yep.
So his job is to have effect on that safety.
Yep, he needs to hold that landmark. He doesn't come off of that. So now, if we go back, Coach, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later, but this is a good example. So if this guy was on a hash right here, then clearly that's a capped landmark by the time that guy gets there. These guys are going to be capping for the most part, our mandatory outside release goes. So if this guy was a hash safety instead of a low player right here, maybe they move this guy out as a low player, but we're going to get by him just like we do this guy, and then we're going to have to deal with the cap. That's where the seam read comes in, is reading that cap. And we'll talk about a width safety versus a quarter safety. So we give him some reads to make when that safety is capping his landmark. The rest of the time, if there's no safety cap there, he's maintaining his landmark. So skipping through some of this. So again, the other guys were really about holding their space. He's about reading the space. So as the seam reader, his job is to read the spacing, read the defender. He also has the responsibility of being the hot read to his side coming off the ball, and he's always going to be the quarterback's second read in the progression. Everything else kind of stays the same with the seam hold. So kind of the reads as they go. So if we get a 0, no high look, that read safety. So again, we're just talking about the reader right now. So if there's no high safety, we want him to stay on his landmark. We're going to step on the toes or we're going to end up with a sidecar passenger in a trail technique, and we're going to blast straight down the field, and we're going to throw that feed 3 ball down the field to green grass and let our guy go get it. If we get a 1 high safety, same thing. The read receiver's job is then to hold the landmark, not to read the landmark, and it's the quarterback's job to move that safety. 2 high safeties. We're going to ask the read receiver to read that cap at 10 to 12 yards, and then based upon his read, so if that safety sits flat-footed, we'll stay on our landmark and we'll run right past him and throw the ball to green grass. If he rotates down in a rotational coverage, we'll do the same thing, stay on our landmark and move vertical. If we have a half safety and a cover 2 look, that situation, we want to work to step on the toes of that safety, and then we want to glance through his inside hip and take that thing vertically through the middle of the field. We want to stay skinny and as high as possible. And then against a cover 4 safety, it's the same stem. We want to push it, but he's not going to give up the inside of the field. He's there to defend the post. So what we want to do is attack through his inside, and then we want to flatten that route out a little bit to create some separation. Now, I said at the beginning of this thing, we want our kids to believe, and as coaching staff, we'll throw it against cover 4. Is that where we want to necessarily go? No. There's a whole lot of other things that we want to do against a cover 4 team, but we will rep this and rep this and rep this, and we will create little tiny windows for our seam read guy off a quarter safety and believe that we can win. This is an example of, this kid doesn't really attack any of his landmarks or get any of the depth. He gets great release. Once he gets his great release, he finds himself in the space of green grass, and he dials it down and waits for the quarterback to see him. So it's not ideal, but it certainly works. I think we've kind of, just real quick, so again, my seam read, I'm going to take a 3-step drop from the gun. I'm going to use a rocker step or a punch step at the end of that thing, and my eyes are on the read route the entire way. There's nobody else in the progression at that point. If that's not there, I'm going to take 1 hitch step, and that's going to bring my eyes to the seam read route. If that's not there, then I'm asking my quarterback to move up in the pocket or move out of the pocket, keep his eyes down the field, and find a different place to go with the ball. Ideally, he can run a little bit. We've kind of touched on most of this. You guys want to just get to some film? All right. I think this is important, though. So one of the things that we do is exchange releases. So one of the big keys, I think, defensively to stopping the 4 verticals is getting redirection on the receivers. We run 3 different exchange releases. We run a trade release, a swap release, and a twist release. Those are just part of the play call. So we'll run dance or trade, dance or swap, dance or twist. Trade is between the number 1. So we count our receivers 1, 2, and 3 from the outside in. Trade release is a swapped release between 1 and 2. A trade release between 1 and 2. A swap release is a swap, which is an exchange of both route and responsibility between number 2 and number 3. And then a twist is 1 replaces 3, 3 replaces 2, 2 replaces 1, and we have a clip of that to kind of show it better. There's a picture of the trade release here. So in this picture here, these guys are almost in a stack instead of a paired relationship down here at the bottom, so it doesn't really show it that great. Up here at the top, it's a little bit better. So the outside guy is working to the inside landmark. The outside guy is working to the outside landmark. So the outside guy now becomes the seam hold receiver. So he's working to his 18 to 22 yards, 2 yards outside the hash. And our quarterback's job, seats the ball, back foot hits at 3. Without a hitch step, that ball should be delivered. And we find that on this trade release, that action bringing him in, there's quite a large window here. Unfortunately, we miss it. We throw to the covered guy who ends up still catching the ball, but we believe that is where he should have gone with the ball right now. We end up coming down here to a covered guy, and our guy just ended up being a little bit better than that guy on that particular look.
Are they still trying to hit landmarks?
Still hit their same landmarks. Landmarks don't change. So here's a,
Was that guy a little bit too far inside then, on the last one,
yeah,
to cut the ball?
yeah,
He's trying to get the pass, right?
yeah. Yeah, he's not where he's supposed to be. He's getting there. I think it's probably maybe has to do with the redirection that he's getting. And he's a big, strong guy. He should be fighting through that a little bit better than that. But yeah, he should be continuing to work vertically on a path to being 2 yards.
And the next clip is the same exact guy running the same exact route, and he makes a better release and doesn't get redirected as badly, and our quarterback is able to drive the ball because we protect him in the pocket.
Oh, I guess you're waiting for me, huh? All right. Will you stop that at the beginning? So the clip kind of cuts off here, but we got a trade release here. So our outside guy at the top working inside to his landmark, and like Coach said, if we're able to step on the toes of this guy, we want to continue to work vertically through our landmark. We'll throw that 3 ball, we'll push it to green grass and let you go get it. This is the swap release, so an exchange of responsibility and role between number 2 and number 3 receivers. So by default, obviously we have our 2 mandatory outside release go routes out here. This guy would be the seam holder on this seam. This guy would be the seam, this would be the seam reader on this seam. Number 3 here would be the seam holder. They're going to swap the release, so he's going to end up being the seam read here. He's going to be the seam hold working to the other hash. It is often that we'll have open receivers that we don't get. But sometimes it works really well, and other times, you get to play another play. Yes.
Talk about throwing the grass on that. What's that relationship you're trying to have with your outside receiver, hold the box, and that quarterback? What's his window supposed to be where you're trying to put that ball? Like if your receiver obviously can get rerouted, he's running on the sideline, you're not leaving much room for your quarterback. Where's he coached to put the ball?
Yeah, so the quarterback is coached that when his back foot hits, and depending on the kid that I have, so when his back foot hits, that ball should be out. So that's going to determine the depth of the ball. So we believe that it'll be on the back side of that 22-yard window. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess my question was more like between the bottom of the numbers and the sideline.
Right.
Where is that?
So if we go from the bottom of the numbers 4 yards, it's going to leave us, I don't know how many yards there are left there. I probably should. But from the bottom of that landmark to the sideline is the distance that we want to fade away to that quarterback's ball. Does that make sense? Okay.
Are you designating the
We have a couple of different ways to do that. So a lot of times we'll do it through our swapped releases by rules that we have for that. Sometimes we'll just say Y middle or F middle. So if you have the middle read, you're the middle reader. The opposite guy is your seam holder. Since we're no huddle, we try to make it kind of pretty simple to get to. So the middle call for us will determine who has that. This is the twist. This was a playoff game last year. We kind of game planned for this. We thought it was going to be there. Quarterback gets a lot of pressure here, so I'm forgiving him for this. But again, I still believe that when his back foot hits, I mean, this guy's wide open, throw the ball. But he still ends up getting some positive yards out of it. But need to do a little bit better pass protecting for him. So our tagged routes, I think are the one we go to the most is the hero route off of our mandatory outside release go. And the way we teach it is I want my quarterback, when he, depending on the kid, he can off of his punch step or off of a hitch, just kind of depends on his arm strength. I want him to throw a 2-ball at the back of the outside receiver's head. That receiver's job is to run a depth of 16 yards, like he's taking the top off the coverage, put his foot in the ground, and expect the ball is going to be on the back of his head. And we run hero quite often with a lot of success. It's tough to defend both the vertical and that back shoulder. Here's a picture of it in the red zone. We like it all over the field, but it's super effective in the red zone. This guy has really good coverage if we're continuing to run vertical. But he does a good job of owning the space. Pulls off on the comeback. The other thing that we'll run is an all stop. So just dance or stop. We want all those guys to run at 12 yards and work themselves right back down their stem, getting their numbers and hands to the quarterback. We're going to skip that one. We don't really run that anymore. This is an in route just by the number 3 receiver in a 3-by-1 set. A lot of times this linebacker right here will carry super hard with this vertical, particularly in a one-high look, because that one-high safety ends up getting used a lot by this guy. So he ends up carrying vertical to try to defend that. And we could just run an 8-yard in route, and that guy sits, and there's just all kinds of green grass. It's a nice, easy completion, and we can move forward on that. Now, the route is right on this clip, but we don't go to him. They still give us the inside. Because, again, our quarterback's rule, he's got to see the seam route first, seam hold route first. He's there, deliver the ball. It was the right read. The in route was covered. So we're a 6-man protection. We're going to check release our back. If the back doesn't have a protection responsibility, we're going to ask him to run a box route, which is coming through his gap, place 5 yards over the center. He can move between the tackles to find open space. We'll also run some 5-man scat package where he has an automatic release, either in a box route, a swing route, an angle route, or a shallow route. This is an example of the box route. I mean, you can see, if you go back to the beginning of that play, I mean, this is a really good football team that we're playing right here. And again, I believe that because we're willing to commit to pushing the ball vertically, I mean, it's 2nd and 5. and yet these guys are all turning and running as fast as they can. Now, we probably should have checked down to our running back here, and him and the official are the only guys left, but we still decided to take a shot out there, and this past year we were probably better than 50-50 on that shot, so we can't get too worked up on our quarterback on it. We got to give him the freedom to let him throw. Shallow. Once again, even though we're in empty and we're running a shallow, tag to shallow to the T, our quarterback's job is still to have his eyes on the seam, hold first. Thought that he had him, got the penalty, take the yardage and go. We run it out a lot of different formations. We really are a 10 personnel team for the most part, but we were running out of 11 and 12. We had some fun putting this presentation together. We decided to go with our heavy 12 personnel look and see what a 330-pound, really defensive lineman looked like running a vertical. Not very good, but he's open. I'm open, Coach. When we install our pass game, we start with Dancer, which is our 4 vertical concept. We will spend a day or two on it in our installation. We won't even add anything else in. We will run all variations of Dancer. Those kids will be so tired, their tongues will be hanging out because we're running the ball down the field. And then we will come back and we will install our quick game. So our hitch game is the first thing that we put in. We're going to tell them that those hitch stems need to look like you're threatening Dancer with every step that you take, and then we'll hitch it up, and we progress through our quick game on that. And then we come back to our other 2 concepts in the vertical game, our post concept and our corner concept, and we really believe that after establishing our vertical push on the 4 verticals, that really teaching the post and the corner concept is really just winning with leverage over secondary that's capped the landmarks we've already identified. So, and then we'll come back with our sprint comeback and our sprint floods. We practice it the way that most teams probably do. We do try to cross-train our receivers. Since we do so many exchange releases, we think that they all need to know all 4 of the landmarks and route responsibilities. We'll do a lot of work on air with those landmarks cordoned off so we can work on timing. We do spend a lot of time on one-on-ones. We really believe that the 4 verticals is really 4 receivers in 4 areas of the field that are winning one-on-ones against the defense. So we think that that's a very valuable place to spend time. 7-on-7 and then pass under pressure. And then I just got some film here that we can watch a little bit. And if you guys have any questions, you can feel free to ask. This one, our receiver down here is way too close. It just allows this guy to enter into the party, which we'd rather him be a little bit more attentive to the outside guy. But nonetheless, we're able to put this guy in a whole bunch of conflict. He wasn't going to be able to cover either of those guys.
So does your seam read ever bend it in a little bit if you've got leverage, inside leverage?
The seam read, if the safety is capping his landmark, then he is bending it. Yep. So if it's a too high safety that has half responsibility, so like a cover 2 safety, then he's going to work through his inside hip and take that thing vertical. So we don't want to bend it all the way off. If it's cover 4 safety who's not really going to give us that space, then we'll try to flatten it out almost like a dig, trying to create space for him over the linebacker and under that safety.
So when he attacks his inside hip, he's going to stay skinny on that?
Yeah, get real skinny. We want to just push through that hip and get vertical.
Attack it and rip through it?
Yep.
This is a hero route. The 1 receiver down here at the bottom.
Yeah, you know, for me, I don't want them peeking. These guys are terrible peekers. I mean, at 6 yards, you can't start looking back for the ball. You're kind of giving the whole thing away. I mean, he's peeking the whole damn way. You know, get to 16 yards, put your foot in the ground, and just know the ball's going to be there. But, you know, I'm old and fat. I'm not the receiver having to do it. But stop peeking.
Someone asked last session too. All that is called all of our heroes.
Yeah.
You know, that guy.
Yeah, so again, the middle read, the seam hold, the seam read is the only piece that's in the progression. Everything else is called. So in this look right here, this is the seam hold. This is the seam read. It's one high. Everybody should stay on their landmarks. Obviously, we saw something on the sideline because, again, that would have been called, not part of the progression. But if we weren't calling that and it was part of the progression, the quarterback would be looking at this seam hold until that safety moved off the hash, and then he'd be coming back right here, which he's open, but we went somewhere else. I like the spacing on this a little bit better. Huh?
Just under 5.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions?
How much do you spend time on your trade, your swap it and your twist, your practice? And how do you install it and what progression?
Yeah, so we'll start with the trade, and then we'll go to the swap, and then the twist is usually probably sometime in the season that we'll introduce that. We introduce them pretty much at the same time that we're introducing the whole concept. So as we install it statically with our default rules, once we start to change receiver responsibilities, and then we'll start changing exchange route release responsibilities. So it gets pretty early into it. And it doesn't really seem, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, our inside receivers run the seam read and the seam hold way better than our outside receivers just because they get so much more repetition at it. But I think the exchanging of itself is so disruptive to the defense, even if those outside guys aren't running those routes perfectly. Typically, you have your bigger bodied guy working those inside landmarks. It creates some positive things for you.
This play right here, if you look at our running back, he does that box route. If there's no one contesting him, he kind of just sits down and finds a hole. Same team we showed the video of earlier. I mean, you get a great seam hold here as he's going up, but the running back totally wide open on a little check down, and that's something that we got better at over the last couple of years. It's just finding that guy if we don't have the look we want.
You guys use columns for landmarks at practice?
Yeah, we'll, if you start at the beginning of this, so what we'll do when we start at the very beginning?
Yeah.
When the first day that we install this, I go out and I just the flat cones, the ones that sit on the ground, I'll build the zones. So I'll build this outside landmark zone, this out landmark zone, the two zones on the hash marks, and we'll run our kids over and over and over just through those, and then we'll work our quarterback's footwork progression. So when your back foot hits, you're looking at your seam hole, and we'll work multiple quarterbacks throwing each of those 4 routes, and then we'll rotate kids through that so they get a sense of running all those different landmarks.
And the coaching point during that, quarterback-wise, is you hit your foot and you throw it. And if the receiver's not in that box, in a helmet, in spring ball, with nobody redirecting him, that's probably not going to end up being his.
We don't adjust what we do based upon the speed of a receiver. We're going to find the guy that can get into the window. If you're not that guy, then maybe you're a guard. We just can't adjust timing that much. I mean, it's. I think the thing that I love about the concept is that it is about space, but it's so much about time too. I mean, the timing of it is. The windows are there. If the ball is delivered on time, you can have an awesome success rate throwing it.
Yeah, 4 guys near it, but none of them can make a play on it as long as we get that ball in the correct window.
And, because of the way we do it, I would say one of the detractors in the way that we do it is sometimes those outside guys will take a little bit of a break unless you're calling their number. so we have to kind of ride them with a whip. That you're part of making that play go, whether we've called your number or not. So, and when we do call your number, you can score touchdowns. So stop whining about it and just be part of the overall positive process.
Now, if you get that backside safety to slide over, are you guys going to that backside one-on-one majority of the time?
So in this look right here. So you're saying if this guy,
No, those are right here, yeah.
so if he's working this landmark, or
Mhm.
yeah, then we'll really, so, it's funny that you say that, I didn't bring this up. One of the things that, and this guy's kind of playing some games with us, I don't know where he's actually gonna end up here, but if you end up with, especially in a 3-by-1 look, if you end up with guys that wanna hug those hashes and sit on top of those hashes, we just make what's called a tube call. We don't bend anybody, we just run everybody straight to their tube. So we'll basically cancel this guy, this whole side out, and we're gonna read off of this guy, just like if we were in 2-by-2, working the middle safety. He becomes the middle safety, he's the seam holder, he's the seam reader, they're both running down, he can't win.
So we rep that when we know teams are gonna go like hard cover two. We'll start repping.
Yeah, I mean-
answer two.
I think the most challenging thing that we face obviously is cover 4. You know, when you're trying to run 4 verticals down the field and you got 4 caps across the top of it, you probably don't wanna run that 27 times into 4 verts, but, into cover 4, but I think we all know about cover 4 is it has its own set of weaknesses. So, we're gonna get the ball to the flat, we're gonna throw hitches, we're gonna throw outs, we're gonna throw our post concept all day long, we're gonna run fish and try to get that safety down in the box and run the skinny post over the top of him. There's a bunch of different ways we wanna attack cover 4 that's probably not in our 4 vertical package, but we want our kids to know that if push comes to shove, we will run 4 verticals against cover 4, and we're not gonna shy away from it. But there's definitely better things we can do. Thanks, you guys, I really appreciate it. It's kind of a small, intimate group,